Howdy everybody, it's Heath Robinson here again, and I am excited to be presenting another webinar with Rad Drew.
All right, great. Well, thanks again, Heath, for having me again. I think it's been about 6 weeks since I was here talking about the Topaz Studio and some of the new features associated with that. And in that time, the guys at Topaz have been really busy because there are a whole lot of new advancements in some of the tools that we have within Topaz Studio. And so part of what I want to do today is talk a little bit about some of those new features. And I'll also be kind of reviewing the Topaz Studio interface, because I know it's still new to a lot of people, and it's a big change with, for the better within the way Topaz is presenting these tools to us. So I'm going to do the best I can to kind of walk through the interface a little bit and share with you some of the things that I do. We'll be looking at today, in addition to some of the basic adjustments and things, we'll be looking at the three tools that have been set up as Topaz in Studio, which includes clarity or precision, what's it called? I'm spacing out here. Precision contrast, which used to be called clarity, and then also precision detail and impression. All three of those plugins that you may remember from the other side of Topaz are now within the Topaz Studio. So I'll be reviewing some of those. So let's just take a look at the interface. And for those of you who have been through this once, I apologize. It'll be a review in that sense, but hopefully I'll be able to introduce a few new things perhaps. So what we're looking at right now is the Topaz Studio interface. And I just want to remind you, this is a free download from Topaz. It's a photo editor, and it allows us to use the Topaz tools within Studio so that we no longer have to use a paid host like Photoshop or Lightroom. These still work in those platforms if that's what you choose to do, but there's so many advantages, I think, to using Topaz Studio. I've been using it pretty much exclusively for much of the work I'm doing here now. Over here on the left, we have the effects panel, and the effects, you notice there are a number of different styles, and then other categories here like favorites that you might choose or effects that you create yourself. Part of what you're going to get with the Topaz Studio, the free version, are a lot of these effects that often bring into play. Let's just pull up a basic one here. When I come down here and I'll do like here's an HDR, basic HDR, and it actually takes two adjustments to create this particular effect. So there's a basic adjustment and there's a precision contrast adjustment. So even if you haven't purchased the precision contrast tool over here, it will still apply it to this effect. You just won't, until you've purchased it, you won't be able to make additional adjustments to it. So let's see. So these are, again, some of the effects. This is just the basic workflow. Across the bottom here, this is where we have imported all, these are the images that I'll be working with today. And I've simply dragged and dropped these right onto the screen here. You can go up and do a file open just as you would in any app, but you can also simply drag your files right onto the screen and it will load them down here into the tray. And you'll notice a lot of these are raw files. So Topaz Studio does handle your raw files. You can drag them in, and then you have the advantage of working with that kind of extra data that you have in those raw files. You can work with JPEGs if you wish also. Over here on the right is the adjustments panel, and I'm going to click on this adjustments button right here. With the free Topaz Studio, everything above this line right here, vignette, tone curves, all of these items come with the free Topaz Studio. So you're getting all of these items with the free installation. These items down here are adjustment packs, and they are for purchase. You can purchase them individually, or you can purchase them as an entire package. once you have, they'll appear in the list, but once you've purchased them, they turn blue like this icon here. Otherwise, they're black and they're inactive. Let's see. A couple of the other things that are part of the basic interface down here along this this panel right here, we have a crop feature, a healing brush, lens correction, and masking capability. So for our cropping, if you select a crop, you can come in here and you can perform various crops to your image. If you have a horizon that you need to level, you can do that all with this slider right here. I'm going to cancel that because we don't really want to do that, but I wanted to show it to you. The other thing we have is a healing tool. So it's very similar to the content aware tools that you find in Photoshop and other applications, but you can adjust your brush size over here, and you can come in and use it to remove or clean up certain things. So just see how that does with taking the tree out here. So it's great for, for cleanup, spot blemishes. This image was taken in the Palouse, and no matter how hard I try, I get dust and specks like this little one right here. So this tool is great for cleanup and things like that. The next thing that's in here is the lens correction. And let's see if I can, I'm going to say done. Take a look at lens correction here. So let me switch over to a raw file, and I'll tap that. Yep, that's what it was. So so on your raw files, you will get the option to have lens correction applied. The default is on, and it will identify your camera and lens, and it identifies most of the major camera brands. You can see here that it's identified my Fuji XE2 and my 18 to 135 millimeter lens, and it's performed the raw image profile correction for that particular camera lens combination. You can turn it off if you choose, but I've left it on and have been perfectly happy with how that's working. You also have the ability to mask at this level, and then also you can click on more here, and you can do some things with your image size and rotating and flipping and so on. So those are some of the basic things. Across the top here, you have several different ways you can view the image. You can look at a split screen, either horizontally or vertically. You can have both images side by side. There's just a variety of different ways that you can take a look at what's going on with your image. You can fit things to the screen. And let me go back to the full screen. The other thing that's that I like, you can use the little wheel on your mouse. I'm just tapping or rolling the wheel on my mouse to zoom in on this image. It's really great when you're processing and you want to see how things look really close up. And I use that all the time, really appreciate that particular feature. The other thing that I like to do sometimes when I'm working, I like to maximize my my workspace. And so you can close the effects panel, and you can close this up so that you can then just work with your adjustments if you wish, and you've got all this landscape then to expand your image and to see what's going on. So just a lot of little utility features that I really have come to like with Topaz. So with that said, I'm going to jump right in here, and I'm going to start with an image that I took in the Palouse last fall. This is a wheat field, obviously in near Colfax in Washington State, and you can see from the original image, it's a nice composition and everything, but it's a little flat. There's not a lot happening there. So I'm going to go up and start with the basic adjustment, and this is the workflow that I'm about to go through is one that I found really, I use it quite a bit. I start with a basic adjustment often. One of the things before I start getting into these sliders that I want to point out, and this is true for every adjustment that you might select here. You notice there's a preset with the default setting. If I click on that, I have 4 preset options. I'm scrolling over them, and as I scroll over them, you can see the changes. There's one that's a saturation boost. You can see the difference. Here's one that's a little warmer. Now, a lot of times I will look at these. More times than not, I will probably just leave it at default and then start working with the sliders myself. But sometimes, like for example, on the saturation boost, that's really not far from where I want to be. So it's a good starting point. So I might select that. and it's applying those settings to that particular look. And now I can begin to work with my sliders if I choose. So it's just, and each of your adjustments has this, usually 3 or 4, I think maybe it's always 4, well, no, this one's got 6, I guess, different options. I'm gonna go ahead and set this back to default. And well, I say that, let's see, there we go. Set that back, use the reset arrow to set that back to default. So one of the things that I'm gonna do is I look at this image. The first thing I wanna do is crop it a little bit. I like the foreground, but I think it's a little heavy in the foreground. And so I'm gonna use the crop feature here. And I want to crop this to a 16:9 or more of a panoramic type aspect ratio. So I'm going to go over here to where it says aspect ratio. And before I begin doing anything, I want to select this and choose original because I want to maintain, well, actually, that's not true. In this case, I want to go down to 16:9. The reason I mention this, if you are trying to maintain the original aspect ratio, the default is unconstrained. So when you start moving these corners around, it's not going to maintain the aspect ratio. It's kind of a free crop. But I'm going to go down here to 16:9, and I'm going to expand this out, and I'm going to play around with this a little bit. Again, I want to maybe limit the foreground just a little bit and do something along those lines. So there we go. I'm going to say done to that, and here's our crop. So it's just a little bit, I think, a little bit more attractive crop to the image. So the next thing I'm going to start with down here is to begin to look at my histogram. Notice I'm in the red, green, blue histogram up here, and I'm going to start by taking my shadows and my highlights, and I'm going to try and slide my shadows over to this end and my highlights over to this end without clipping or blowing out on this side or losing my detail in my shadows. So I'm going to start with the shadows and drag this to the left, and you can see that line creeping over. There's a little too much, but I'm going to back it off, and I'm going to stop about right there. Go to my highlights, do the same thing on the other side, bring that up a little bit. And the next thing I'll probably do here is play with my exposure a little bit, and I don't know, I may just, it's not bad, but right where it is. Bring my clarity up just a little, and I may saturate it just a tiny bit. So again, we're just getting started here. Now, one of the things that I'm seeing, remember I mentioned the dust that I get out in the Palouse. So I'm starting to see, as I begin to bring out the detail in the image, I'm starting to see some spots on here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit my healing brush, and I'm going to come in here, make it a little smaller, and I'm going to clean up that spot. I see another one up here, right there, and maybe a little one there. And that, excuse me, that looks a lot better. So I'll go ahead and say done. And I'm going to go ahead and close up this basic adjustment. And I'm going to move on to the next adjustment I'll make, which is my precision contrast. So I'm going to go down to my precision contrast. Now this is the one that is, this along with the HSL color tuning combines to create what used to be called clarity in the earlier plugins. In Topaz Studio, they've given these both much more power than they had before. So I'm going to start in here with my precision contrast, and I think I shared this the last time. It's a technique that I learned through looking at the some of the tutorials online that Heath and others at Topaz have created. When working with precision contrast, one of the first things I do is come over and drop my saturation down to 0 so that I'm working only with the black and white tones. It just simplifies my histogram considerably, and it's a technique that once I started using it, I really liked it. So the next thing I'm going to do here is begin to, again, work my histograms out toward the edge. So I'll start with my shadows, and I'll bring it to the left a little bit, and not much is happening there. But if I go down to my midtones and slide to the left, look there, I went a little bit far. So kind of probably right about there. Then I can take my highlights and begin to bring them over to the right. And again, I don't want to go up, but there, about right there. So now, if I go down and reset my saturation, I'm going to click on the word saturation and it resets to 0. Now I can begin to make my my contrast adjustments at a very precise, in a very precise way, both at low, medium, high, and even a micro level. So I'm going to just kind of expand a little bit here so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to take my, primarily I'm watching the image, but I'm also watching that histogram to see if I'm doing anything really crazy with it. But a lot of times I like to take the sliders and just maximize them and look at what it's really affecting. So you can see with the micro contrast, it's really getting a lot of those smaller contrasting areas. So you can also go into the negative and have everything get really almost cartoonish. So what we're looking for is something in between here that's going to bring out some of that detail. Same with low. If I take it all the way up, you can see where it's affecting things. I'm going to play with it in somewhere in between, probably about right there. And the same with my medium. And then the high, if I look at what's happening with the high, I bring it all the way up, and you can see that it's starting to get some of these wheat things here in the front, and then the areas that are dark here. I'm going to try and bring this down a little bit, and I like that a little bit better, just a tiny bit low. On my lighting, then I can begin to adjust my shadows and midtones a little bit. I might bring my shadows up just a little bit. Now, part of what I'm looking at here are these trees, and they're very dark right now, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get that, lift that here, but let's bring our shadows up, and let's try bringing the midtones up. There we go. But see, now I need to bring that back a little bit. Let's see. Bring our highlights down, midtones up. So I'm trying to get a little bit more detail in those trees, and we're getting there, and we're going to be able to do more of that in precision detail. So I think about right there is where I want to be. Now I'm going to come down and make one last adjustment here to my saturation, and I'm just going to bring it up just a little bit. We're going to play with those colors a little bit more in a minute, but that's about as far as I want to go. And now, even now, with just those two adjustments of the basic adjustment and precision contrast, here's our before, and here's our after. So I'm going to go ahead and close up this adjustment. And again, here's our before, very hazy and kind of, lacks clarity. And then here's after those adjustments. So what the heck's going on here? All right, so the next thing that I'm going to do here after doing the precision contrast, I'm going to go into HSL tuning. This is one of the most powerful things that I've found within Topaz Studio. It allows us to actually control the color not only of the overall image at a global level with this icon right here, or this button right here, but also we can go into each of the colors within the image and adjust those individually. So I'm going to very quickly just go through. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to just click on my red. Now notice when I mouse over the red color, you can see the hash marks that appear. You can see them in the roof, you can see them in the barn, the horizon, and places where red occurs in the image. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And as soon as I do, you notice it changes to red hue, red saturation, and red lightness. Now you can change the hue of your color red, but I'm not going to do that. I'm happy with that hue. What I am going to do though is increase my saturation a little bit and watch the roof of the house, and take it a little bit more so you can see. So if I just ramp it all the way up, you can see that it's getting this area and these red areas. So I'm going to back that off to a reasonable adjustment. And again, I'm trying to remember, looking at what it was when I was there, trying to be realistic about what I'm seeing. The other thing I can do is lift the lightness of that red color. So if I bring that lightness up, you can see I'm adjusting how light it is. So I'm going to back that off a little bit, probably right about in there. The next thing I'm going to do, I'll click on the orange hue. And again, you see where that's appearing in the image, but I'm just going to take the orange all the way up, and you can see it's affecting really all the wheat areas. And I'm going to take that back down considerably. And I want to richen it just a little bit. I don't know, maybe to about right there. And if I want, I can raise the lightness a little bit. So you get an idea of how much control. Next, I'll go over here to the yellow. And again, if I bring this up, you can see it's really affecting the yellow and the grasses here and back up on this hillside. So I'm going to take this back down. I don't want to overdo it, but I do want to bring that yellow out a little bit in that area. So I could also lift the lightness of that color just a little bit and bring that up. So now here's our before and here's our after. I could also begin to play with details here if I wanted, and I could do maybe just a little bit, but see, I don't really like the effect. I don't know if you saw it. Let's go back. There it is without, and with the details on this particular adjustment makes it a little bit too coarse for me, so I don't want that. So now I'm going to go ahead and stop with this. So now we've basically, that concludes our clarity adjustment. So there's our before, and there's our after. So the next thing I'm going to do here in this one is my precision detail. This is one of the new ones that has just been added in the last couple of weeks here. And again, I'm going to go to my adjustments, and I'm going to go down to precision detail. And this again is just an incredibly powerful tool. It lets you get very precise in where you're making your adjustments. You notice there's an overall adjustment, which is global for the whole image. Lets you work with the small detail, medium detail, and large detail, but then you can also work with just the shadows and just the highlights. So I'm going to start with the shadows. One of the places that I'm wanting to see a little more detail is in these trees. So I'm going to see if I can bring that out. I don't know if I can here or not, but it's probably going to be down in my lighting that I get that. So I'm going to start down here. I'm going to raise those midtones a little bit and see it's really not there. Let's see if it's in the darker shadows. There it is. See the trees coming up? So I brought detail out in both of those trees, but it hasn't really affected a lot of the rest of the image. And now I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit, and I can work with my small, medium, and large details. And again, I'm going to maximize these. Just look at what happens. These are our small details, and you can see it's not, if we go back to 0 here, we're in the shadows though. So let me go back to overall, and I'm going to raise those small details all the way up, and now you'll see how it's really getting things very, very crispy here if I go all the way up, which is not what we want, but just a little bit of that adds a really nice level of contrast to our image. Now, if we need to, and I don't believe we do in this particular case, but you do have the option to boost that a little bit and intensify it. I'm going to leave it at 0 for now. Our medium detail, if I maximize that and look at what's affected, you can see it's these the medium contrast areas. I'm going to back that off. And this one, I'm going to play with what happens if I go below. I'm going to keep it just a little bit above, I think. And then my large details, if I go all the way up, you can see it's going to get a lot of these bigger chunks of higher contrast areas. I'm going to pull that down a little bit into about right there. Now I can also, if I choose, I can also sharpen here a little bit and take a look at how that is playing here. Takes a second. So there we go. So now here's our before and here's our after. And I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and close this one up. Now the other part of the precision details, they're just like clarity is precision contrast and HSL color tuning. With precision detail, the companion to this is channel mixer. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is challenging. I've been working with it, and I don't feel real confident to share a whole lot with you about it. But I can show you a little bit that what you're working with here is the luminosity of each of these colors, the red, green, and blue, and you can adjust each individual red. You can swap out colors. So if you wanted well, let's see how if I change the red, I can change it to appear green. You can do some really wacky things for more abstract kind of work. You can adjust. Right now I'm adjusting each individual level, but if I were to go back here and adjust and have my maintain brightness on yes, anytime I move any one of the sliders, it's balancing the color across that spectrum. So again, I haven't used this in this particular image, but I wanted to mention it to you. I'm still learning it. I'm going to go ahead and cancel it and delete it by clicking on the trash can here. But I do want you to be aware of it. I'm still, like I said, learning how to get the most out of it. So I don't want to try and tell you anything I don't know anything about yet. So I'm going to skip over that. The next thing that I'm going to do here is go down. I like this image, but what I'm seeing, it's still a little bit harsh for me. It's very sharp and clear, but it's almost too much so. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed using is this adjustment called Radiance. I'm going to go ahead and select this, and what I want to do is add a little softness to this in a way that's attractive. Now, it doesn't take a lot of this effect to really, well, let me just show you. Here's the strength. We're at 0 now. I'm just going to take it up to 16 and watch. It's really gone crazy with this effect. I don't nearly want that much, but when I bring this back down to where it's only 1 or 2, I can start to get a little bit of a soft glow. Now, sometimes I can't control the sliders as well as I'd like, so I come over here and click in the cell where the numbers are, and I type in what I want. So I'm going to type in 3. Okay, so now what we've got is a little bit softer hue to our tone to our image. So if we turn this off, there's without that radiance adjustment, and there is with it. So you can see, I don't know, to me, I really like that effect, and it just adds a nice finishing touch to the image, I think. So the final touch for me on this, I'm ready to share this or post it and share it with the world. The last thing I want to do is put my my signature on it. I have my signature PNG that I purchased from Photo Logo, and I'm going to just drag it over here and drop it in this panel, in the adjustments panel, and it pops it in to the screen. I can click on the edit button here, and then I can size it and position it wherever I choose, something like that, and close that up, and there we're done. There's our image. So there's before where we started, and there's where we ended up. Considerably different image, and I think, you know, I really have enjoyed how this all works. The next image I'll take a look at is this blue hydrangea, and now this is a raw file, and I'm going to come in here and turn this all off, and so here's our image as it comes in raw. The first thing I'm going to do again is to do my basic adjustment. I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to again look at my histogram, and I'm going to try and drop my shadows down to the left a little bit over to the edge, and bring my highlights same way. I'm watching that histogram. Whoops, kind of climbing up the wall there with the blue, and about right there. So now I can begin to play with this exposure, and I might tweak the saturation just a very tiny bit. So there's before and there's after. Not a whole lot of huge change there. One of the things though that I'm noticing, I shot this in a greenhouse on a cloudy day, and I was hand holding, so I had a very high ISO. So you can see I've got quite a bit of noise here. So the next thing I'm going to do is apply a noise adjustment, and the noise adjustment or noise reduction adjustment is really powerful. And I'm just going to take this up to, oh, I don't know, maybe 50–60%, and look at the difference. Here's without that noise adjustment. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Here's without, You can see all the noise in the background and in the subject. And then here's width. We've still maintained our detail in the image, but we've really softened and lost a lot of that distracting noise in the image. So it's really pretty remarkable adjustment. So after the noise reduction, I'm going to go back into my precision contrast. So I'm going to go down to precision contrast. And again, this is the one where I drop my saturation down and I move my sliders on just the black and white histogram. And take my shadows down. Oops, a little much. Again, I'm watching that histogram, bringing my midtones up. So now maybe a little bit lower here on my shadows. So now we've got kind of all the way across. So I'm going to go ahead and click on saturation to reset to 0, and there's my image now. Now I can begin to, I might bring my highlights have to come down, and I can barely see the blue is climbing up the wall there. I'm going to back that off a little bit because I can see I'm blowing out in my, that's much better. Okay, so now I can begin to work with my micro, low, medium, and high contrast, and I'm going to tweak that a little bit. I'm watching again, this time I'm watching the image, and there's our before and there's after. I'm going to just go down, I may just play with vibrance just a little bit here, and that's good. I'm going to stop there. So there's our precision contrast, and then the other part of that clarity adjustment is our HSL color tuning. So I'll go into that, and I'm trying to think here. Yeah, so my color tuning here, I want to go into this green behind. What I want to do is darken this background considerably and let this blue hydrangea emerge. So if I go into my green here and I drop this brightness, I can begin to drop the background off a little bit. So I'm starting to kind of let that fall off. We go here and let's see, take my blue, and I don't want to go very far, but just a little bit, and I might drop it down a little. So now that green isn't where I want it exactly. So see if I can. There, that's better. There's before and there's their after. So we've got this popping out a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and close this up. And then finally, I want to do my precision detail adjustment. I'm going to go down here. And once again, in this case, I'm going to go to my shadows again, because again, I'm trying to drop these shadows off. And I'm going to go down here to my, my shadows, and I'm going to drop that background down considerably. And my midtones a little bit here. I'm not sure if my black point's going to help me here much at all, but sharpen that a little bit and bring up my, again, I don't want these areas to be sharp, so I'm intentionally dropping into the negative on some of those background areas. So there's before and there's after, and we're starting to lose some of that background a little bit. My highlights, I want to come in here and I want to drop those a little bit so that I'm not blowing out these areas right here. And I got my midtones, and that, there we go. That's a little better. So that's it on that precision adjustment there. At this point, I might want to do the same thing I did before with the radiance adjustment. Again, just to add a little bit of softness to it. And this is just kind of a very, very fine adjustment. If I take it up even that far, we start to get a little wacky. I don't want that. I'm not looking for an abstract yet. So I want something that's going to just give a tiny bit of glow. So about 3 is all I want. So there's our before and there's our after. Go ahead and close that up. It looks like I've got something here. It might be in my precision contrast. No, it's in my HSL color tuning. Yeah, it's in here. I've done something to, let's go back in here and look. I've got my blue out of whack here because it's cutting off the, I'm getting this weird shadow here. Bring that up. There, that's better. So let's close that and go back into our precision detail. And I want to go back to my shadows, and I want to drop those shadows a little bit more in the background. And a little more there. Okay, so at this point, I mean, I could call that, I could say we're done here, and that may be as far as I want to go. But one of the other things that we have the option to do now within Topaz Studio is that we have impression. So you've used impression in the past with you know, as a plugin. Well, now it's in Studio, and it's just so much easier and nicer to use. You don't have to go to your plugin and click out of here and have it flatten the image and come back. You can actually just add your impression right into to this area, because I can come over here and slide down, and here's my impression adjustment. And so at this point, I can begin to, I want to turn this into a painting. So again, the background is already starting to go into this blurred background, which I like. I may play around with choosing a different brush, something that gives this a little bit different look. And again, you may want to play around with these and look for one that really suits you. I kind of like that. At this point, I'm going to slide down here. We have all these different options here in terms of a high number of strokes, and each of these adjustments there, I like that better. I can begin to adjust the opacity here. If I take it way down, I'm going to start seeing the canvas come through, which is not the look I'm going for. So I'm going to increase my opacity here and get that to where I'm not seeing that canvas behind. So there are just lots of different ways you can process this. Again, we have the same color options here. If we wanted to play around with these a little bit, we could, in the same way we did before. We can brighten our image here a little bit if we want. We can drop our highlights a little bit, and maybe drop our shadows to bring these down a little bit. So that's about where I would leave that. So again, you've got lots of different options here for choosing different styles of paint. Now, the other thing that we could do at this point, we can stop here and be finished. We could, you know, add our signature to this or whatever. The other thing we could do, though, at this point is to apply these changes. And what this is doing now is it's going to flatten this image. Takes a second. It's going to flatten all of these adjustments that we did into this one image. And we could then begin to add some other effects if we wanted. So I might go over to, again, I could go into impressions, and I can look at all of the different types of painterly effects and apply those to my image. And you just got, these are, a lot of these are the ones that come with Topaz, but then also we have a public region where each of us can save our stacks of adjustments by simply clicking on, let's see, let's go back to, I'm going to undo a couple layers here if I can. So here's, I can't go back any further because I flattened that image. So if I were to add another adjustment here, let's say, I don't know, let's add dehaze and play with that a little bit. So I could add a series of adjustments here, and if I wanted to save that as a preset, I'm going to click right here on these stacks, save effect stacks, and I can go in here and say, you know, Topaz webinar, and I can, if I choose, if I say yes here, it's going to put it in the public domain, so it will be seen by anybody out there. So some of these that we're seeing here are from the public. If you just prefer to keep it to yourself, you'd leave no, and you can begin to identify your image by what you've done to it and so on. You can give it some tags and say okay. And once you do that, that is going to show up over here. Where'd it go? My effects. It's in there somewhere. Here it is, Topaz webinar. So you have that option to create a look and save it and reuse it. Okay, I'm going to launch another image here, and let's see. We're doing good on time, I think. All right. There's another one that I wanted to show you. It's, you know, the detail effects are such that most of the time we're talking about applying detail to clarify an image, to make it sharper, to bring out those details that we want to see. But the other thing that I like to do is to use the detail adjustment to add ethereal effect or to soften an image. So this is a shot, again, this is a raw file, these sheep in France on a foggy morning. So I've already got a little bit of fog going on, but I want to enhance that. So as I look at this image, one of the first things I'm going to do, I notice that I've got these 3 sheep, but I've got one sitting back here behind this guy, and I want to take him out. So I'm going to go to my healing brush, and I'm going to reduce the size, and let's see how this does. Sometimes it does better than others with this kind of a removal, but we'll see how it does here today. Well, it's not bad. It's getting there, but sometimes it takes a few passes to get it right. I'm going to say that's close enough for rock and roll. You can do a little bit better if you take a little more time with it, but we've gotten rid of that other sheet behind this one. So now the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to go right into my precision detail. And so, you know, sometimes it's not like you have to do a lot of different adjustments to these, to each image to get the effect you want. Sometimes less is more. So what I'm going to do here, oops, I didn't get the right thing. I want to do, yeah, precision detail. So I'm going to, instead of increasing the detail of this image, I'm going to start to drop things down. I'm going to start in the overall area here, and I'm going to just start dropping my details. And look, I've suddenly given this whole image this ethereal look. I could, you know, tweak that a little bit here and there. I can go to my shadows, which is going to be these areas in this area here. I'm going to drop those a little bit, see if I can soften that. And large details. So there's our ethereal looking image. What I really wanted to do here, what I meant to do, was HSL color tuning, and I want to bring up the yellows a little bit in the grass, just a little bit. And you can see if I go to my orange here, I can kind of pop that a little bit. So I'm adding a little bit of color back into the area. Here's my greens. I can brighten those just a tiny bit and saturate them. So now here's our before and here's our after. Go ahead and close that up. And then one last thing I might do, and this is one of the free adjustments that comes with Topaz Studio. I'm going to put a slight vignette on this. And so to do that, my strength is over here. I can adjust the size of the vignette here, and then I can do the transition. There's a very hard transition. I can make it round, and I'm going to increase the size a little bit. And then once I get it kind of where I want it and the shape I want it, I'm going to then adjust that transition to where it's very soft. And then I'm going to drop the strength down to where I can barely see it. To me, the best vignette is one that's just kind of hints at being there. So I might even take it down even further. So there's before and there's after. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and call that one a day. Again, if I chose to and I wanted to add my signature again, I would just simply take it over here, drop it on the panel, let it load, size it, and place it. And there we go. All right. Well, let's see. I'm going to do one. I'm going to do one more, and then we can, open up for questions if you have them. And I don't know. Those of you who've watched me do these before, I love to shoot infrared. This is an image that I shot out in Tent Rocks in New Mexico. Just a little bit out of Santa Fe. This is a raw image shot with my Lumix DMC LX7. That's just a little point and shoot that I had converted. And again, what I do with this is start with a basic adjustment. I'm going to drop my saturation down to 0. I'm going to play with my exposure here a little bit. I'm going to darken this. I'm going to drop my shadows, bump my clarity, and maybe even open my highlights a little bit with that. Now, the other thing is I'm looking at this. I don't like this dark spot down here, and I don't like this tree right here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and go to my cropping tool. And here's where I was trying to mention this before. If I start moving this right now, it's unconstrained. I can go this way. I can go this way. There's nothing constraining it to the current aspect ratio, but I want to maintain that. So I want to go over here and click on original. And now I'm going to crop this down to eliminate that tree on the side and this dark spot underneath so that it's something like that. I think my horizon looks good. So now, so we've got there. Now, when I look at this, one of the things I'm noticing is that you can see I've got a little bit of noise going on there. So I want to go ahead and reduce that noise early in my workflow so that all the other adjustments I make will take advantage of that noise reduction that I've done. So I'm going to go to my reduce noise, kind of blow this up so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to reduce that noise maybe, I don't know, 50, 60%. What you're watching for here is looking for reduction in the noise, but you don't want to turn your image into a cartoon and lose all your detail either. So it's kind of a balancing act. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to my precision detail. And I am going to go and start with my shadows and increase my detail there a little bit. And then my highlights. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to increase my highlights a little bit. I don't know. I'm going to try and drop my black point here, but I think I'm going to have better luck if I go into my shadows and my midtones. And let's see, some detail. Let's just sharpen it a little bit. We're getting there. And so then the next thing I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and collapse that and go to my precision contrast. And I'm going to explore these shadows a little bit. Drop my highlights, my midtones there. That's what I'm looking for. I want to darken those blacks quite a bit, and that's pretty close. Now I can also begin to go in here and make adjustments to my contrast a little bit, and that's looking pretty good. So here's our before. Well, you can't really tell with that, but and after. So if we actually were to remove these other adjustments, that's kind of where we started after the very basic adjustment, and then we reduced the noise, added the precision detail, and the precision contrast. So I'm gonna, yeah, so again, that's looking pretty good. So you can see how you can use this across a lot of different types of images. You can work with raw files, you can work with JPEG, and it's just a lot of fun. Now, the other thing that you might do with this, if we were to go, once you've done all your adjustments, let's go back to, let me see here, this one right here. So this is the, let me just type in webinar, and we'll go down here to Becky's Farm. Okay, so this is all the adjustments we've made. One of the things that you do have the option to do within each of the adjustments, you have an opacity slider. So if you feel like you've maybe overdone it on any one level and you don't want to go back in there, you can drop your opacity on each of these levels individually and see if you can kind of tweak it to get kind of the look you're going for. The other option you have is to tweak all of them together. So down here at the bottom, you have the effects opacity for everything. So I can drop this all the way down and it pretty much takes us back to our original image. Or I can play with this opacity and kind of fine tune it to where I want it. So a lot of times I have a tendency, you may notice, to oversaturate, and I think I'm sometimes exaggerate that with us here. I often mitigate that, but with my opacity slider. And Heath, I think I better stop. I'm aware of the time, and I've kind of gone right up to the edge here. So
no, that's good. It's good stuff. Can you hear me, Rad?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was awesome. You covered a lot of stuff. We got a lot of great feedback. So I really appreciate that. I know you get excited about your workflow, and I definitely don't want to cut you off. But if you'd like to follow Rad, you can always do so at raddrewphotography.com. That's his website, or on Facebook at facebook.com/raddrewphotography. And if you have any questions, you can contact us directly at webinars@topazlabs.com. You can sign up for upcoming webinars. I know we've got Joe Reardon on one coming up in the future, I think next week. You can sign up for that at topazlabs.com/webinars. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. Rad, thank you so much for presenting. I really appreciate you taking your time. We got a lot of great feedback.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for everybody for showing up today.